Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a UK election update. Just going to give you a sort of quick update of what's going on with the UK election, given that election day is on the 4th of July, very close to us now. I have given you a whole video, a big old primer on the UK elections and how our electoral system works. I'll be dipping into a little bit of that content again, just to re-explain certain aspects of what's going on. But please go and refer to that if you want a good handle of all things politically UK. Okay, so what has happened? Right, I'm on the left-hand side because we're going to look at a graph that I've just recorded this video and found out as my noggin was right on top of the graph. First thing to note is that UK inflation is down at 2% today. In fact, this is the lowest in the G7 apart from Italy. It's come down from 11% where it was. This is really good news for the Conservative Party. And this would be an absolutely massive election boost had this happened in the usual election. Unfortunately, the situation now is I think the Conservatives are so far gone that this probably won't touch the sides. They're going to use this. The other problem for the Conservatives is when inflation was high, they use the argument that it's nothing to do with us. We are not responsible for inflation. These are global issues. It's a war in Ukraine. It's the energy crisis. It's this. It's that. And as a result, I'm sorry, inflation is high, but don't blame the Conservatives. And of course, when inflation then comes down, and then comes down particularly well, then they can't say, yeah, but that was us. Yeah, hang on, you said the going up was world events. How can you take responsibility for it going down in a similar fashion? And so I think there's an understanding that you can't have your cake and eat it. In other words, you can't have your cake and not eat it and eat it. So that situation with inflation is quite big news today. But interestingly, I just don't think it will touch the sides. And the reason why is because these polls have been unmoving. They've been unshifting for the Labour Party and Conservative Party in any significant way. We can see just recently a little downtick in both Labour and Conservatives and a little bit of an uptick in Reform. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the main topics of conversation at the moment amongst the mainstream media and political analysts is not whether Labour are going to win. It seems that everyone has accepted this now, but how much will they win by? That seems to be the question. And in fact, we know this. We know that everyone's accepted this because even the Conservatives are campaigning on that now. They're saying a vote for, if you don't vote for Conservative, in other words, if you vote for Reform, you will get a Labour supermajority. So they are campaigning some of the Conservative MPs on vote for us as a vote not for a supermajority. It's not a vote not for Labour. Like, Labour are going to get in. But what we don't want is like this massive supermajority, which is on the cards. In fact, if we look at the latest MRP polling, so MRP polling is a particular type of polling that takes into account what happens in each constituency rather than just a general overview of what voters might think and then just extrapolate that right across the UK. MRP polling is more complicated and it can give you a much better sense of, and it's been improving to the point where it actually predicts the number of seats quite well. Anyway, the latest one that's just come out, Ipsos poll, has estimated that Labour could get 453 seats and the Conservative 115, which would be the worst defeat ever. Now, this is because, it's because of a massive disaffection of 14 years of Conservative Party rule. That appears to be the main driver. But also Labour have made a very, very, and for some people controversial, very, very distinct decision, very explicit decision to go for the centre ground. So Labour used to have been your left-wing party, Conservatives your right-wing party. But what's happened over time is the left wing has been filled with other parties, right? And so you've had the Green Party have come along and sit further to the left of Labour, certainly now. So as Labour have gone to the centre, the Green Party has stayed on the left and said, hey, if you want progressive policies, you need to come to us, because Labour are just conservative light. They call them Tory light. They've adopted massively the centre ground. They were not going to put up taxes, and we'll talk about this in a little while, and basically not going to change too much. So Greens have said, right, we'll be the proper left wingers. Lib Dem, interestingly, Liberal Democrats, who normally take up that centre ground, marginally centre left, have gone to the left. As Labour have gone to the centre or to the right, Lib Dems have gone a little bit to the left, and their policy manifesto is quite good, actually. I like the Lib Dem manifesto. But because we have first past the post voting system, these smaller parties will hardly get any. Well, the Lib Dems actually probably will, but Reform and the Greens will not get many seats at all. And you have SNP and Plaid Cymru, who are the Scottish and the Welsh parties, only in Scotland and Wales, who adopt centre-left positions as well. And that means that the left vote always gets split. Sort of 3 or 4 ways, depending on where you are. Which means if Labour ever want to get in, they need to get in on a landslide. Last time they did that was 1997, when there had been 18 years of Conservative Party rule. There were lots of scandals. Everyone was really fed up and wanted change. And you had a massive landslide that Labour were able to capitalise on. Now, this time round is a very different, although somewhat similar situation. So they need a landslide, and they are going to get it. And they're going to get this partly because the SNP, who have been stealing their votes up in Scotland over the last 20 years, have now had some scandals, which mean that people are fed up with the SNP. And Labour are going to get some of those seats back in Scotland, which is really going to help them get over 326. So that's super important. But the polls are just too much in favour of Labour. There doesn't seem to be anything that Conservatives can do to change that. In fact, they seem to be making it worse. And so whatever way you look at it, there is going to be a big victory for Labour, because like in 1997, people are fed up 14 years of Conservative rule. Now, I know there'll be Conservatives out there who aren't fed up, but just talking about what the general public are saying, and apparently the polls, I was listening to an analyst today saying that I've been around here, we were all over the north, and I'll tell you what, one thing that is really consistent is everyone wants the Conservatives out. Now, what you want in place of the Conservatives is another question. And there are some similarities maybe with the Biden-Trump election here, by point of fact that there are aside from people who are big fans of Trump, there are a lot of people in America who are anti-Trump, right? Who if you ask him on the street, he's so divisive. He's like, I love him, or no, I definitely don't want him. But a lot of those people who don't want Trump aren't like pro Biden. So Biden hasn't attracted huge numbers of people to positively vote for him. And this is a big challenge in November. It's not so much that there's enough people who don't want Trump, but are there enough people who are willing to get out, go and vote because they're genuinely motivated to vote for Biden? So if Biden loses some votes, if there are people that don't like Trump, so they stay at home, then Biden's going to have some real trouble there. So it's about motivating people to vote. Now, I think there's an element of this in the UK as well, which is that most people are voting, who will be voting in this election. A lot of people will be voting against the Conservatives, but I don't know how many people are going to be voting for the Labour Party so much, because they've adopted this centre ground that doesn't really do much in terms of really big policy headlines. It's quite insipid, and they are just playing safe. With the cricket analogy, it's playing with a straight bat. I don't want to get out. I'm not going to score runs, but I'm not going to get out here. You're not going to bowl me out. So Labour are like, we don't want to make any mistakes. We don't want any disasters, any just car crash interviews. We're going to adopt an almost, like in a previous election, it would have been seen as a Tory manifesto. We're going to adopt a really safe manifesto. Now, I've been listening to some analysis on why they're positioning themselves like this. A lot of it is you win elections on the centre ground. I spent a lot of time talking about that in my last video, which is what Clinton did is what Blair did. So you go around, you ask your focus groups, what do you want to vote for? Right, we're going to go in the centre ground. I don't think they've done that this time. They haven't really sought what people really want, because actually I think they could have gone further left with their manifesto there, but they've gone really centrist. and the feeling I get is that the word on the street is that the Labour Party are afraid that there genuinely is no money left in the pot in government. This kind of happened in 2008, wasn't it? When there was that post-it note left, like good luck, there's no money left, when Labour's gave the government to the Conservatives. Well, it's the kind of same here. And Labour, if they do anything bold that's going to cost a lot of money, then they'll have to be held to that by their manifesto and by the electorate. And if it's going to mean raising taxes, and that's obviously highly controversial, they don't want to do that, even though that's generally what left-wing governments will do more often than right-wing governments. Although there's a really high tax threshold that the Conservatives have taken on. It's been a really odd time where the Conservatives have overseen like huge taxes. Anyway, since they think, I understand, that there's no money left, they're like, well, we've got to play it super safe, and once we're in, then we can reassess. But if we go bold now, it could bite us on the arse. So we go safe, get in. And if it is as bad as we think it is, then we're going to have to say something to the electorate along the lines of, yep, we've got no money. But then it's going to be more austerity type stuff, which is what's associated with the Conservatives. So Labour getting in. So getting in is not going to be a problem. But it's what you do after you get in for Labour that will be a massive problem. Because people will want change. People will want, well, we voted for you now. We didn't like the Conservatives. I mean, it is going to be more austerity, then what was the point of voting for you? So they're going to have to offer something, but if there's no money left in the tank, and their entire policy apparently is basically built around the economy will grow, and as the economy will grow, there'll be more money. They're not going to borrow more. It's not about stimulating the economy by tax and spend. It's the economy will grow, and therefore the coffers will grow, and then we can afford to spend more on the NHS and so on and so forth. And really safe, and it's not really setting anyone on a light with like enthusiasm, and you might therefore get some leakage out to other parties there. Now, the Reform Party was saying that recently, I mean, this is a poll average at the moment, 41 to Labour, 21 to Conservatives, so still a 20-point advantage. 16 for Reform. There was a poll that came out recently that had Reform above Conservatives, and then Nigel Farage came out and said, hey, I should be the new opposition leader because we have got a polling that's above the Conservatives. I should be in a leaders' debate because, we're more popular than Conservatives. It's not as easy as that. So we have a first past the post voting system. And the thing about Reform is even with 16% of the votes, 650 MPs, you'd think they'd get 16% of the MPs. They're likely to get somewhere between 1 and 5 MPs. That's how broken our system is. Now, some people see that as an advantage. I see it as a huge disadvantage. Even though I don't like Reform, their voters deserve to be represented in Parliament, and they won't be. The same with Lib Dems, the same with Green. Green will get somewhere between 1 and 3 MPs. Their Brighton and Pavilion MP, Caroline Lucas, is a fantastic politician, is stepping down, and they're probably going to lose that to Labour, but they might gain Bristol Central, they might gain Sheffield, one of Sheffield constituencies, maybe is it Herefordshire as well. So they can get a few, but they're not going to get 6%. Goodness me, no. And the Lib Dems are not going to get, 65 MPs? They could get maybe 50 MPs. I don't know. If we go back to the MRP polling, here we have, I'm sure, does it not have the other parties? I don't know that it does annoyingly have the other parties listed on there. Maybe, yeah. But anyway, here we go. Meanwhile, Ipsos said the fate of SNP. So SNP, Labour's expected to get 15 seats, up from I think, was it 2 that they got previously in Scotland? So that's a really big increase. That's SNP expected to get 15 out of 48 seats in Scotland. So, yeah, the Labour expected to do much better up there, of course. So the Greens, Bristol Central, North Herefordshire, Waveney Valley, Brighton Pavilion, losing to Labour. So that's what it says there as well. And the the reform will probably, I mean, Nigel Farage was going to be campaigning for Trump, literally, on the campaign trail, and then decided last minute to come back and run in Clacton, which is a constituency that was the only one that ever had a UKIP, when UKIP were around, UK Independence Party, that was pro-Brexit. Clacton, Douglas Carswell, who's a Conservative there, defected to UKIP in 2015, and then he was re-voted in 2017 as a UKIP candidate. So that's their only success. So Nigel Farage has said, right, where can I definitely, or where have I got the best chance of getting in? So he's going for Clacton, which is sensible. But 16%, they are looking at getting only, some people say maybe again, like the Greens, and the Greens have got 6%, Reform on 16%, and they're still thought to get only maybe 4-5 seats at the most. Now, that's incredible, but it's because all of those votes are spread out fairly equally among all the constituencies. So you spread out 16% of the national vote into every single constituency, and actually you don't get enough in that constituency to be the most, to get the biggest number of votes in any one constituency. So they are going to really struggle. The Lib Dems have 11%, but they're used to this now, and they'll do a lot of targeted campaigning, and so they are much more, they'll get fewer votes probably nationwide than Reform. You can see 11% compared to 16%, but they'll probably get about 50 seats or so. I don't know, there's different ideas. MRP, I was hoping that the Lib Dems, we'll see if I can find what the polling suggests. So that polling actually suggests 38 seats. So sorry, I was a bit more generous. But 38 seats compared to Reform's 5, and yet they get fewer votes than Reform. That's how bonkers the first past the post system is. I know there are advantages either way, but overwhelmingly, I think the advantages are more evident for some kind of proportional representation. So that's the lay of the land. The Labour will get in. How big that majority will be, how much they'll be eaten away at the sides by independents concerning what's going on in Gaza, so that they'll lose some to independent candidates up in the north and to Greens in places like Bristol Central particularly, very much a Green area, and lots of people who are against the Israeli activities in the Israel-Hamas conflict are, I've heard some being vox popped, they are going to be voting Green there. So Green are going to be looking to get in it's either Green or Labour in that particular constituency. So the Labour will lose some to Green, lose some to possibly to Lib Dem a little bit, lose some to Reform, I think, up north, and but they will more than compensate that with the gains they'll make in Scotland and the general political landscape where people are fed up with the Conservatives. So the question is, how big will that majority be? And then you hope that if you were a lifelong Labour supporter who sits to the left, I was listening to a really good interview of Mick Lynch, who's RMT, so a union, in charge of a union, really good talker, really knowledgeable guy, knows his politics, and he's a union are backing Labour still, but there are some unions that aren't backing Labour because they are not left-wing enough at the moment. They've gone too centrist. But Mick Lynch is saying, look, he's quite realistic, exactly what I've been saying to my mates who have been quite disaffected. I was like, you've got to understand, they're going for this boring centrist approach because they need to get into power. It's getting into power, and then you work out what's going on, and then you can change accordingly. But then, quite rightly, there are these criticisms to say, is that not duping the electorate by saying this is where we're going to be, and then when you get into power, veer off somewhere else? It is the nature of politics, though, is that the first and foremost, you can't do anything unless you're in power. So get into power first, and that's a game that Labour are playing. That much is for sure. The other thing, just to hammer home how the Conservatives know it's not going well, is that several things are going on. Not only are they talking about vote for us to avoid a supermajority, so it's accepting they're going to lose. They also look where Rishi Sunak is campaigning at the moment. So what happened previously in the last election is that Labour lost a lot of their traditional heartland in the north of England and the Midlands, and they lost that to the Conservatives. So it's been thought over time that actually the Conservatives are likely to lose that back to Labour as people have been disaffected with a lack of infrastructure and lack of investment in levelling up the north to the south. The north is generally seen as poorer or underinvested in. The south is seen as more affluent. So you get more Conservatives down south and more Labour up north, especially amongst the bigger cities. And so they lost some of those to the Conservatives, which is all very controversial. But they were always looking to be vulnerable in losing back to Labour. So you would have thought in a normal election they would be campaigning super hard up there, super hard to make sure that those red wall seats don't go back to being Labour, that they stay with the Conservatives. But Rishi Sunak and the Conservative campaign effort have been focused in the south of England. You see where it's been the last couple of days. He's going to seats that have 15 to 25,000 vote majorities. Although those are huge Conservative majorities, and the reason is because they're afraid of losing big seats in Tory heartlands. So I think in this article, most articles, they're talking about the big cabinet figures and big Conservative names that are looking at losing their seats. Here we go. Penny Mordaunt, that's Portsmouth North. Not Portsmouth North. She's Portsmouth, which is my neck of the woods. She was running to be the head of the Conservative Party, leader of the Conservative Party. Grant Shapps, who's presently the Defence Minister. Gillian Keegan, Johnny Mercer, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Wow, these are really big hitters in UK politics, and to think that they're going to lose their seats means that, wow, there's going to be a complete decimation, but also a lack of big hitters. Now, a couple of things to note. I was hearing an interview where they're asking, well, are they now gearing up to work out who's going to be their next leader? And they said, basically, not really, because of the people who are would be in the running to be the next leader are fighting for their seats. They haven't got time to think about who's going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. People are properly worried that they are going to lose their seats, in seats that should be absolutely nailed on. And so that's happening. There's also a really interesting situation about, so some people are saying, does this mean that the Conservative Party will shift back to the kind of centre, more moderate conservatism, or will it shift further to the right because Reform have come along, challenged it, and you've had this issue in the Conservative Party is, do we meet that challenge from the right by going further to the right and make much harsher policies to do with immigration so that we keep those voters who are going to leak to Reform, or do we go to the centre in the classic way that we would normally go in a general election? Now, there's some data, I need to look into this, but I was listening to analysis saying actually there's proper empirical research to suggest that parties on the centre-right, and I wonder if this is the same for the left, that are threatened by the far right, who then try and appease the far right electorate by moving to the right, end up doing worse than the centre-right parties that move to the centre as a way to reject. So rather than taking on the far right and saying, oh, we need to keep those voters, so let's go far right ourselves, you need to reject that and say that's not our politics. We don't want the far right. We don't agree with that, and move to the centre and have a responsible centre moderate politics. Apparently that latter is more successful, according to Politics Joe I was listening to. But so that's interesting. So I wonder whether history will say that the Conservatives should have gone to the centre, but actually they did try to go far right. Yeah, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, all these like real right wing. Interestingly, most of them from families of immigrants, back before. Interesting that they become the most far right anti-immigration. It's fascinating stories to be told there, I'm sure. But they've gone really hard to the right and are saying that we should fly all our immigrants that we round up to Rwanda, get them on a plane, blah blah blah. And so the Conservatives have gone to the right rather than to the centre, and that could underwrite why they might have a worse election. But the question is, well, will the Conservatives then say, well, we've lost this election, maybe we should have gone further to the right? Or do they say maybe we should have gone further to the centre? And I just listened to an analysis that said it looks like the people who will retain their seats will be the more moderates. And therefore you might get a Conservative Party that comes out of this that becomes that readopts that moderate centre-right position. But on the other hand, you might have a Conservative Party that gets so tonked in this election that they go and try and merge with Reform. And that is a very seriously considered outcome to this election, that they could be so vastly defeated so hugely in this election that they might see they've got no choice but to get together with Reform and become some merged party that you would assume would then actually swing further to the far right, and then they might lose some of those moderates over to, or if Labour's adopting more of a centrist position, or it's an interesting time. There's so many ramifications going on here. End result is Labour are looking like winning. Question is how much, and then are Labour inspiring enough? Will they actually do any seriously different kind of politics, or will it be actually more of the same? That's, I guess, to be found out. Anyway, hopefully that was of some use to you. Thanks for watching. Toodle pips.